Hey everybody, welcome into this week's episode of Tony's Spot On Fishing. I'm your host, Tony Krizek, and today we're going to do something kind of different. We're actually going to talk about reel maintenance. And what we want to talk about reel maintenance for is if you guys and girls are out there fishing the real thick stuff like we've been in, where you're wading rivers where reels might have been dunked in the water, fishing the thick cover and you got all that gunk built up inside your reels, even though most people will tell you, hey, something to do during the off season, reel maintenance is very important midway through the season like we are right now. So today we want to break down how to take apart, clean, lube, and put back together a baitcast reel. Now the particular reel that we're going to use on today's episode is an old Shimano Curado. It's actually one of the first models they ever debuted of the reel, probably over 30 years ago, back when they were still the red color. Now, most baitcasters, depending on the brand, be it Abu Garcia, Daiwa, you name it, Luz, any of those brands, they're going to be pretty similar inside. So we've just chosen this reel as a basic baitcast reel to take apart, show you where to clean it up, grease it, lube it, and put it back together. So let's not waste any time. Let's get into it, and we'll start dissecting the reel and show you how we do this. The first thing that we're going to want to do is actually to take and start with the handle assembly first. The handle assembly is held on. There's a little cap here with this screw, and we'll go ahead, we'll undo that screw, and I'll show you what that will expose here in 1 second. Grab a different screwdriver here. And when you take these reels apart, always have a couple different sizes of little screwdrivers. A little pair of pliers too helps, just so we can get in and do this. So, our cap and that screw is going to come right off. We're going to put this, you can either lay down some paper, paper bag, paper towels, whatever you like, but you're going to want to keep everything in order as you take it off so it's easy to remember how it goes back on. So we put our cap and screw off to the side. Just a little nut is what holds this handle on. So we'll go ahead, unscrew the nut. Just like so. We can go ahead, pop the actual handle right off. Now, what you're going to see, there's a little washer, and sometimes being a little dirty, it'll stick to the actual reel handle. There's a little washer right there between our star drag and the handle. So you want to make sure that we'll just take that off because we're going to want to wipe that down here in a second. So again, handle, our little washer. Now, our star drag is going to come off. And basically all we're going to do is just back it off. Basically like we're loosening the drag completely. Now there's a little, what we call a clicker gear here. And this is really when you turn your star drag and you hear that little clicking noise to let you know you're tightening or loosening it. There's a little nub in there and it just rubs on these gears to make that sound for you. So we're going to put that off to the side. Finish unscrewing our star drag. It's going to come all the way off like so. Now, there's another nut right here. Finish unscrewing that the rest of the way. That comes off. Now in this particular reel, this is one part where not every reel has this. There's a little spring here, just like a spacer type setup. Some of the newer reels won't have this. The older ones will. So depending on the age of the reels you're cleaning, you may or may not have that little spacer spring. The next thing we're going to do is get our drag washers out. 2 drag washers, just like so. We're going to go ahead and lay those down. Now, the next thing we'll do, we'll go ahead, we'll pop the tension, the cast control. And again, we'll lay this just off onto the side. There is, inside here, I'll pop it out, another little tension spring. And this little tension spring here, again, we want to make sure we keep it with the cap so all the parts go back together. Again, some reels may have it, some may not. That's another one of those areas where it'll differ. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do is actually take the side plate off. And to start, and again, this is where a lot of reel manufacturers vary on how the initial side plate will come off. Shimano has the little thumb screws. We'll back these guys off completely. If you have a hood, a front hood that can be lifted up, that can come off at this time. Oops. And now we can take that first side plate off. So we'll go ahead, lay that off onto the side. We're going to pop our spool out of the reel. And again, we'll deal with this in a little bit. Put him off onto the side. Now, this is where it can start to get a little tricky. We've got our 1, 2, 3 screws here that are going to hold on this side plate. This is going to expose the actual insides of this reel, the gearing, the bearing, the main bearing, everything. And this is where a lot of guys and girls kind of shy away from, but there's a lot of gunk that can build up in here, and we got to get that out of there. So we're going to go ahead and back our screws out of there. Now, the number of screws may vary depending on the manufacturer of the reel that you're taking apart, but they're always going to be right on that side plate, so we know exactly what to take apart. So now, we just very slowly lift up on our assembly. Somebody's not fully backed out yet. There we go. And our whole piece will come out. We can go ahead and tip these guys. We'll put our little screws just off on the side. Now, there's a little bearing that'll sit in the cast control area here. When I tipped it to get those screws out, that little bearing came out. So we're going to keep him off onto the side too, clean him up, and lubricate that. Your main bearing, which is sitting right in here, we can pop out, and that'll just push right out like so, your big roller bearing. And we'll go ahead and put that guy off on the side. Now, inside on the main gear shaft, we've got another spacer. We'll take him off. And there's 2 little screws, or little springs rather, and these are just tension against the main side plate. You got to be very careful with those guys. If you leave them on, they're going to go flying, and they are extremely important to keep everything from binding up once you put it back together. So for the time being, we're just going to set those off on the side, as we can actually go ahead and start to clean a lot of the gunk out of here. Now if you look down inside, there's another smaller gear, nylon gear in that area there, nylon washer, and then the plastic. And what we're going to do is we can take a Q-tip and we can access in there, and we can get any kind of gunk, dirt, old grease that we see down in there. We can go ahead and just remove it. And this main gear off on the side here, this is what will actually turn our worm gear, and we want to make sure we get that as well while we're cleaning it out. For any of the larger stuff on the shaft here, we can just take a paper towel and get a lot of this gunk off of there. Take our Q-tip, just make sure we got everything out of those gear teeth. That's looking great. If you see anything, dirt, gunk, just go ahead, wipe it up. Maybe even some excess grease or oil from the last time. If you had your reels cleaned, maybe this is the first time you're going to be attempting it on your own. But we want everything out. All right. Now we can actually start to go ahead and lubricate the reel. Now, most reels come with reel oil, but you do need more than just reel oil to properly lubricate the reels. A good old standby is grease on the gears, oil on the bearings. And that's pretty much a standard as far as how we're going to clean these up. Now, what I particularly like to use is actually from Ardent, the reel butter. It's a good grease. It won't bind up on you. It's lightweight, protects your gears. You don't have to worry about having any metal shavings in there, anything breaking down. As far as grease and oil, the Ardent products are my personal favorite for lubricating the reels. You can over oil and over lubricate a reel. Less is more in this circumstance. So we don't necessarily want to pour the grease on, make sure we get every single part of the gear hit. If we just put a little rub here, so I'm just going to put a couple drops, a little there, and just a little bit more there. And we can take our finger and just kind of work it in. Because if we were to put too much on there, we can actually bind the reel up. So we'll just use our finger like so. And that will also grease our gear there as well, which actually the spool will sit inside to actually help turn the spool. Now, we can actually go in and dribble just a little grease on that gear right down in there. That gear, that'll control the worm gear. We're going to drop just a little bit there, and then we'll go ahead and spin it to work it in. Just like so. Put one more little drop. And we'll just go ahead, turn that main gear, let the grease work itself in. Just like so. Now, we can go ahead and clean out off on this other side plate. There's that little bearing there. Go ahead, clean out that bearing good, where the spool sits as well with a Q-tip. Make sure we see no debris or dirt. And what we're going to do This is, like I say, on the bearings we use the oil. And again, less is more. Just a little drop right into the bearing. That is all you need. Same with the secondary housing. We can wipe it down. Get all the gunk out of there. Like so. Now is the fun part. We're actually just going to go ahead, put it back together. The main reel body itself, the main gear housing, everything has been cleaned and lubricated. So now we can show you just how quickly this can go right back together, and just cleaning a little bit here and there as we go and reattach all the parts. First thing, that little spacer that was on the shaft, we can wipe down the outside good. Even take our Q-tip, make sure all the gunk is out of there. Perfect. One thing you'll notice, there's an indent or a slice out either side of that main post. Our little piece has 2 notches. Those notches will go right down and seat themselves in those slots, just like so. Now, we can go ahead, put our little tension springs back on their posts. They just slide on. There's nothing that they screw into. Just good old gravity that's going to keep them in place for the time being. We put our housing right back on, just like so. Let's grab our main bearing here. And the bearing, we're going to run just a little bit of oil, just a couple drops inside it, and just go ahead, turn the bearing. That should be plenty. Go ahead, slide him on in there. We got our little screws that we used, or we took out rather. We can go ahead and secure the side plate at this time. And we don't have to go all Hercules on these guys. We just want them nice and snug. All right. Let's go ahead and do our cast control next. So again, that real teeny bearing. Again, we'll just wipe down any gunk on there, and we'll insert it right back in into the cast control area. I'm going to take just another drop of oil, a couple drops just like so. Our spring is inside our cap. And as I said when we were taking apart, that's going to be one of those things that may differ on various brands, depending on the manufacturer and the age of the reel. If it has it, it's got to go back on it. All right, now the drag washers. Every reel is going to have some different numbers of these drag washers. And what I'm doing is just wiping them down individually. This particular one has just a couple. And just slide them down individually, like so. Now, as you can see, we've laid out everything. With having everything laid out, we know the exact order now that everything will go right back onto the reel. Our tension spring first just slides on. The next thing we'll do, we'll take our nut. You may want to hold on to the post itself just to start. About like so is good. Now, square nut, and you notice on our star drag, we actually do have an insert where that nut is going to fit right inside there. So, we line it up so it'll actually seat itself, like so. We can go ahead and tighten it down a little more just by spinning the star drag. We have our little clicker gear. And that clicker mechanism, those gearings, we're going to want to go face down so the smooth side will actually be what is on top. Just like so, it sits in there. Next, our little spacer washer just lays right on top. Our handle will go next, which just slides on like so. Followed by the nut. Now, we're going to tighten the nut to the point where this flat edge is going to be right even with that little hole, because inside of our little cap it's grooved to actually fit the nut, and therefore we can put our top cap right back on there. The screw will go right in. Just like so. And then we can screw that down. Now, last couple things we're going to do. This is the worm gear. And this is what your line guide is going to run on. So we can take a Q-tip and just kind of brush through there. Make sure we get any of the dirt out of it. Rotate it a little bit. And again, we'll drop just a little bit of grease onto that gear. You can see I just dropped a strip in there. So when we start to turn the handle, it's going to start to work itself in there. Again, we don't need any more than that. Pop our hood right back open. Now this reel did have line on it, so we're going to run the line back through the line guide real quick. We can go ahead, wipe down the shaft of the spool here. Again, there's another little bearing at the base. So we'll go ahead, just do a couple drops of oil there. Kind of angle it back and forth. It's worked in good. And this will go right back into place. We can take our side plate now, and go ahead, put our screws right back in, and that is all there is to it. Any excess oil that we have on the outside of the reel from our oily, greasy hands just wipe down, and that's it. That's all there is to it, and it's amazing. A little bit of maintenance like that once or twice a year will keep these reels running for a long, long time. Like I said, this is one of the original Shimano Curados. We're talking about a reel that's probably close to 30 years old and still working great just because of proper maintenance. So we hope that shed some light on just how easy it is to do all this work on these bait casting reels. And in future episodes, we'll probably break down the spinning reels as well and how to clean and oil and maintenance those. But what we showed you can work on just about any manufacturer out there. Take your time. Great little side project to keep all your gear working. That's all the time we have for this week. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Tony Krizek, and we'll catch you next time on Tony's Spot On Fishing.